So hi everyone, I think I've started the live stream. Let me see if it has got loaded. Give me a few moments. Okay, okay, I see that it has got loaded and I also hear my voice in my mobile. So welcome everyone. This is Tech Primers. So in this session, we are going to see how to integrate Zuul into the existing Eureka and the Hystrix which we designed as a part of the coding session 1 and 2. So if you had seen my previous videos, in the coding session 1, we saw how to create a Eureka service, how to use a client and server, register to the Eureka service, and how to access the client via the Eureka service to the server. Okay, so how to call the server via the Eureka service without even having to know the port number and the host name. Okay, that is what we saw in the first video. In the second video, we included the Hystrix implementation in client, so that whenever there is a failure and when there is service call which is going outside the REST endpoint, so how do we handle the failures using Hystrix and how Hystrix helps us in accessing or handling those failures. So we saw that in the second example. In the third example, we are going to see how to integrate Zuul. So basically, what is Zuul, right? So if you had seen a traditional application, how we design is we, for example, let's say this example. So this is how Zuul will look like once you integrate it. However, let's say you design a shopping cart, right? So you have lots of us coming from the UI. However, internally you have different microservices handling different requests. So how do you proxy your request from the UI until your backend services, which is having different port numbers, right? So that is where these Zuul will help you. So Zuul can act as a API gateway and also it can act as a proxy. So API gateway in the sense, let's say you have let's say you have an application which is used by hundreds of downstream applications or hundreds of different or teams. Okay, and you want to load balance your system in order to make sure that you don't have to give a different URL or a host name or a port number, but you have to load balances. Along that, you have to distribute it with different backend services. So, for example, if you take this particular diagram, so I have just basically written these are the microservices we have. So we have an API gateway, we have a service registry, we have different services. So one is called a catalog service, one is called an image service, one is called a payment service. So these are different services used by a UI or a request which is coming in. So how do we distribute these requests across these services, right? So how do we register these services into a single one? That is where we saw the Eureka, and we can interact among each other using the Eureka, which will take care of the load balancing and the routing. Now, the API gateway will help us in routing a single URL into a different proxy URL. So, for example, if you see this particular URL will be accessed from the port number 8080/API. Okay. However, our internal microservice will have /catalog, which is hosted in a different port because this is running in a different port or a different cloud machine itself. Same way, this is running in a different machine and different port number, and same way, this particular microservice is also running in a different machine and different port number. How do we make sure that the destination client doesn't have to know what port he has to access for each microservice? Okay, that is where Zuul comes into picture, and that is where Zuul says. So if you introduce Zuul, so how we will access this particular microservices /API/catalog directly. So all the REST endpoints inside this particular service you can directly access using /API/catalog under the port 8080 itself. So we don't have to know 8082. So Zuul acts as a proxy in delegating yours from the client till your microservice. Same way for the image service, you can just access saying /API/image/API/payment for the payment service. And where we have implement Hystrix is when you have an external service, when we connect to a bank or something, if their database or if their connectivity is down, so we can handle the fallback. That is where we can use Hystrix, so which we saw in the previous video. So Zuul is basically if you see, Zuul is basically a front door for all the requests from the devices and websites, which Netflix uses for streaming their application. So for every request which the Netflix server gets, it comes to Zuul, and from there it gets routed to different applications. So Zuul basically acts as a proxy and it can do routing. So if you have heard about the edge service, so Zuul is nothing but the edge service. So edge service is nothing but a gateway for all that coming into your data center or your system. Okay, so that is what Zuul is all about. And why do we need that in microservices? Because we have lots of different processes, and we don't want the destination client to know all our host names and ports, and we cannot. And in the cloud environment, these will be dynamically changing. So that is why we use the service registry to register that, and the service registry will be registered with the API gateway. So from the API gateway, we will be routing all our requests via the service registry to the different services. Okay, so that is what we are going to see in this particular example. So in the previous example, we have the code base, right? So we have we created three different microservices. One is the Eureka service, hello client, and the hello server. So I have opened that. I have already uploaded this to the GitHub as well. So if you go to the GitHub/tech primers, you can see this particular example and get that downloaded, and you can even code with along with me. Okay, so I have opened this particular projects, all the three projects in IntelliJ here. So the one which we need now is the API gateway. So we have to create a Zuul server which will be registering to the Eureka service, similar to how the hello client and hello server is registered. So let's create a new Zuul service. So I'm going to go to Spring Initializer and I'm going to create a Zuul. So I'm going to say Zuul service. The dependencies which we need for these are Zuul and Eureka client. So what we need here is the Zuul, because Zuul is going to be the library which Spring Cloud provides. So I'm going to use that, and also the Eureka discovery, because this particular Zuul is also going to be a client, so that it will know what are all the different services which are registered to the service registry, which is done by Eureka, and we can call the different services using the naming convention rather than the host name and the port number. Okay, so that is what we are doing here. So let me generate this project. Okay, I've generated the project. Let me unzip that. So I'm unzipping the project, Zuul service. Okay, it's unzipped. Let's open that in IntelliJ. Okay, let me open that. So if you have any questions, you can post that in the live chat session there. So I'll be checking that once in a while so that I can respond to you guys if you have any questions then and there. Okay, let this project come up. Meanwhile, let's just take a look at how we have designed the Eureka service. So in the Eureka service, there is nothing. You just added a enable Eureka server, and we added a Eureka client configuration. In the hello server, we have a REST endpoint which says /hello/server, and we have some configurations to connect to the Eureka service. Okay, same way to the REST client. Where is the REST client? I think the REST client got closed. Let me open the REST client. Yeah, hello client. So open the hello client. Okay, so hello client is here. It is open. I think maybe it was not showing up. Okay, so we have the hello client, we have the Eureka service, we have the hello server, and where is the other one? Why is one getting closed on this? I don't know why. So let me close the one of the window. So let me close Xmind. So this is how it works. We can open it later. So let me close this Xmind and see. Okay, I think it's getting overwritten here. Okay, this is because I didn't maximize this. Okay, let me start. Okay, so we have four projects, right? Yeah, four projects here. So from the hello client, we are using the naming convention using the Eureka server. We are accessing this server. Okay, so and there is a fallback method. If there is a failure in this particular place, the fallback method will be called. That's what we saw previously using Hystrix. Okay, this is the hello client. So the new service which we created is the Zuul service. If you see the dependencies, there will be two dependencies. One is for the Eureka client and one is for the Zuul. So there is a Spring Cloud Starter Eureka and Spring Cloud Starter Zuul. So this is what is going to help us in creating a proxy. So in order to enable Zuul, you have to add an addition, enable Zuul proxy. So this is going to be create this particular process as a proxy. Also, we need to enable the discovery Eureka client basically. So this Zuul proxy is also going to be a Eureka client. So we need to add that addition at Eureka client. Okay. Also, we need some configuration information so that the Zuul proxy can connect to the Eureka service, right? So I'll create a application YAML. Okay, so this is the application YAML. So I already have the properties noted down in Notepad. Let me paste these. I'll tell you what each means. Basically, there is a Zuul related proxy. So any request which is coming to this particular server will be routed based on this particular proxy. So what I'm doing is I'm going to prefix the endpoints with something called API. So I basically do a API slash API. So from there, I now need to route it to. We have a. So we have what is the server? Hello server, right? So we have a hello server. Okay, all the requests which are going to slash server will be routed to hello server. So this is the URL which you can give. So let's discuss about the URL later. So I'll meanwhile create the one first line. So these are the two different services which we have. So these are two different microservices which we have. If you see here, the one with the service ID is the name with which the client is registered with Eureka. So if I just mention service ID, Zuul will automatically use Eureka to do a call there. So if you see, I have enabled the Zuul here as well. So the port number in which our Eureka service is running is, what is the port number? 8090. 8070, okay. So I'm going to use 8070. So what I'm doing here is I'm going to tell you that okay, the Eureka client is registered in this particular pool, register there, and also the port number which I wanted for this particular Zuul services 8079. So I just made it as 8079, and I'm just making this application name as Zuul service. Okay. So what I'm doing here is I'm going to disable Hystrix because all the requests which this guy Zuul is routing will be added as Hystrix, added with Hystrix command, and by default the timeout for that is 1 second. So all our requests will fail by default. So that is why I'm making it as 60 seconds by default. So I'm just increasing the timeout for all the Hystrix inside this particular project just for safety. Okay, so what we have done is we have created the application name, we have created a server port, we have given the configuration details for the Eureka client, we registered so that this particular Zuul service is registered as a client. Also, we have mentioned the path of how we will access this hello server and how we will access the hello client based on the URL, how these are routed. So if you see here, these are routes which we are creating for the hello server and the hello client based on the URL and the service ID. So in fact, we can replace this also with the service ID. So we don't have to, but there is a provision to use URL as well. So if you don't have Eureka, you can directly use the URL. So you don't have to have Eureka mandatorily for Zuul to act as a proxy. So if you use this ID, Eureka will be used. If you use the URL, Eureka will not be used. Okay, so all the requests from API server will be routed to this hello server. So that is what we'll see. Meanwhile, let's start all our processes. So I'm starting all the servers. Hello, starting. Eureka server is starting, and the hello server is also starting. Okay. Meanwhile, we have to start the Zuul service as well. So let's start the Zuul as well. So basically, all the Zuul service, the hello client and the hello server, all these will be registered as clients to the Eureka service registry. So let's look at that first. So once the Eureka service is up, we will be able to see the Eureka service registry. So localhost 8070. So 8070 is where we are hosting the Eureka service. So it is not up yet. Okay, so all the processes are coming up. So basically, I have four. If you see, I have four instances of IntelliJ project. So I have four servers running. Okay, and we are going to see in the Hystrix dashboard. Sorry, in the Eureka dashboard, we are going to see the three different processes, microservices, which are registered to it. So, okay, the Eureka server is still not up yet. It's taking a while since I did all of them in parallel. Okay. Okay. So our server is up. So once I refresh the localhost 8070, this should show all the instances which are registered. Right now, none of the clients are registered with the Eureka server. Okay, so this is the Eureka dashboard. So once all the servers are up, we should be able to see the clients registered there. So I already see the hello client and hello server up. Let's go and refresh it. We should be seeing the hello server, hello server. Okay, and you see here all the services have come up. So even the Zuul service is up. So these are the different services registered with the Eureka now. So all these will be able to easily interact with each other with just the application name. So we don't have to give the localhost colon or whatever port number which these are running on. Okay, so that is the advantage of the Eureka service. So now what we are going to do is we are going to call the Zuul service. So now Zuul is acting as a proxy between these two. So from the Zuul, I'm going to access the client and the server. I'll show you how to access that without having to use the different port numbers. So what we are going to do is we are going to use the local host 8079. I think 8079 is the port number for the Zuul service, right? So 8079. So we just need to use the port number for Zuul service. Apart from that, we don't have to know the port numbers for the client and the server. So first, what I'm going to do is I'm going to access the server directly. Okay, so the URL what we configured for the root is here. So API/server will take us directly to the hello server. So I'm going to say API/server. So this will directly route all our requests to the hello server. Okay, now inside that, what is our REST endpoint? So inside that, our REST endpoint is REST slash. Let's check that once. So our hello server, what is the REST endpoint? REST slash hello slash server. So that is our REST endpoint. So now I'm going to say REST slash hello slash server. Okay. So if you see here, I have URL path called API. Then I have the service name, which is the server, and then I have the REST endpoint of that particular service name. So this is going to take us directly to the server via the Zuul proxy or the gateway. Okay. So this should return us the hello world from the server. Okay, so if you see here, this is coming directly from the server. So if you see here in the REST endpoint, we have written hello world here. So this is coming directly from the server. We are not accessing the server directly. However, we are accessing it via the Zuul service. So if you see the dashboard, you can see. So Zuul service is registered to 8079, and from here we are calling the hello service using the routes which we have mentioned here in the application YAML. So that is all taken care by Zuul automatically. So you don't have to create any code, or you don't have to add any code. So Zuul takes care of that automatically. So we can directly call the server. So now let's access the clients. For accessing the client, we have to // client. So API/client, and also the final endpoint will be client. Okay, so this is also going to return old. However, the request is coming from the client. From the client, it is routed to the server. So if you see here, the fallback has got triggered. So there is some exception which has happened in the client. That is why it couldn't go to the server. So if you, let's go to the client. So if you see here, there is a fallback which has happened, and that is why it has come to the fallback method. So let's see what has happened here. Okay, so if you see here, we were accessing from the client is using the HTTP hello server REST hello and server, but something got failed here. That is why we got the exception here. So right now I did not print any exception. That is why I'm not able to identify what was the exception. I think it could be the timeout. Let me check if I had disabled the timeout. I think I had disabled the timeout. No, looks like I have not disabled the timeout. So what I need to do is I need to disable the Hystrix timeout. I'll just add that Hystrix timeout, because by default the timeout for Hystrix is 1 second. That is why it fails immediately. So let me add the Hystrix timeout in the client, and we can check. Okay, so I'm pasting the Hystrix on here. Also, I'm going to append this message with the including client, so that this will say hello world, and it is going to include including client, so that we will know this is coming from the client and also from the server. So let me restart this client. Okay, meanwhile, let's go to the dashboard and see what is the status of the dashboard. So if you see here, the hello service, hello client is not there. So once it is up, we will be able to see that registered here. So yeah, it is all up here. So let's go to the server and check once. Yeah, it's all good. Okay, now I'm going to access the same endpoint. So this time we should not see the fallback. Instead, we should see the message. So however, we did not receive it. Let's see what is the problem. Hello client. So basically what has happened is the Zuul couldn't route it to the server. So that is why we got this particular exception. So what is the REST endpoint which we had? REST/hello/client. Is that the correct one? So let me go and check. REST/hello/client. That is what I see. That is correct. So what is the error in the Zuul service? The error says forwarding error. It's basically not able to, load balancer does not have the available server called hello client. So basically it's not able to identify the hello client. Maybe it's because it got registered very recently. So let me do a refresh again, and let's see if it is getting routed. Okay, cool. Yeah. So previously when it was calling, it was not able to identify the hello server client because it was not registered, and we tried immediately. So now the registry has got refreshed, and now if you see, we are able to get the request. So this first part, hello world, is coming from your side, and the second part is coming from the client side. And we are accessing using the Zuul proxy. We are not directly calling the client. We are just calling the Zuul host name and the port number and the Zuul NS. And this is the endpoint of the client. So this is how we can access the Zuul proxy or the Zuul gateway. So this is how we configure as well. So if you don't have Eureka, don't worry, you can have the URL directly here. You can have the HTTP or the HTTPS, you can have whatever host name and the port number here directly. So that all the requests which are coming to this particular API/server will be routed to this particular port number by default. Okay, so you have to mention the service here. So that will also work. So let's restart this and I'll show you that as well. So 8071 is the port number of the server, hello server. I'll just restart again. Okay, once it is up, we should be able to hit the server and then the server should be redirected even though we are not using the service ID like before. Okay, so let's go to the server slash hello slash server. So this should return only the hello world. So yeah, if you see here, it has got the hello world. So this particular request is not using the Eureka client. Instead, it is directly going to the um, different port number, which is doing a proxy basically. So this is the example of a proxy. The client, if you see, that is the example of a Eureka service, basically a gateway service. So if I summarize it again, let me bring that Xmind. Let me bring my Xmind up. I closed it. So Zuul is a library which Netflix uses for creating or acting as an edge service for any request coming into their data center or to their server, and from that particular API gateway, they proxy or they route those REST endpoints to different services internally. So that is what purpose of Zuul. So internally we have the service registry which is written in Eureka, because from one microservice to another, you can call using the service name instead of the host name and the port number. So even from the Zuul will act as a client and it will be registered to the Eureka server, and it will not know what is the host name and the port number. Instead, it can directly use the service name for navigating through the processes. So if I open the diagram which we saw a few minutes ago during the start of the session, so there will be a API gateway in the first. So let this open up. It's taking a while to open up. Okay. So if you see here, so the request comes to the gateway. So the gateway will have only one port number, so that will be 8080. So you access it via the /API, and from there, if you want to navigate to a different microservice catalog, it will be automatically routed via the Zuul gateway using the Eureka service to directly go to the catalog service without even having to mention port number from the client side. The same way for different microservice. That is how Zuul takes care of it. And we have implemented Hystrix for fallback mechanism, where you are calling an external service where you expect failures. So there you can add Hystrix and control this particular circuit. So you can just open or close the circuit based on the failures which you want to handle. Okay, so that is what I wanted to cover as a part of this particular session. If you have any queries, or if you want me to do any specific video on any specific technology, let me know. I'll try to do that. I don't see any comments right now, so that's it for this particular session. Meet you again in the next session. If you like this particular video, go ahead and hit the thumbs up. If you didn't like, hit the thumbs down. See you again in the next video. Thank you.